my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Be seated. From Luke chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. At that very hour, some Pharisees said to him, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow. And on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem." Jerusalem. Jerusalem. The city that kills prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I have desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. And you were not willing. See, your house is left to you. And I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Sybil Shepherd. She has close ties to Memphis. And she also has twins. So it seemed like she would be the obvious choice to name the two hippos, twins, that had been born at the Memphis Zoo. I'm not sure I would consider that an honor, but she did. And she began to think about the names for these two hippopotami. You've got one hippopotamus, but you've got two hippopotami. You learned something today, didn't you? So Sybil Shepherd is to name the hippopotami. There's only one catch, though. The mother, hippopotamus, whose name is Julie, is not letting anybody near her babies. If you've ever been very close to a hippopotamus, and I bet you haven't, you realize that one can weigh about 2 tons. If you have a mother hippopotamus guarding her young, you are going to stay clear. So Sybil Shepherd has this challenge to name these two twins, yet she doesn't know if they're male. She doesn't know if they're female. She knows nothing about them, and no one else does either. All they know is that Julie is taking really good care of her babies. And the babies, even though they didn't have a name, they stayed close to her because they knew that she would protect them from danger. And as young and as stupid as they basically seemed, they still knew a good thing when they saw it. That good thing being a 2-ton, funny-looking gray and pink creature who seemed to always provide them with just what they needed. So why should they stray? I mean, why should they? In some respects, hippos, cats, and just about any other animal you'd care to mention, when they are young, at least they have enough sense to stay close to mama, to stay close to protection, to stay close where they can get food and nurture, and yes, even love. You won't find kittens turning away from the fur they know. Chickens don't go far from the protection of the hen's wings. I've always heard if you see a cute little tiger cub, you better watch, because that means a ferocious mother tiger is just around the bend. If you go to Gatlinburg and you think you're going to pet a little bear cub, you better watch out. The mother bear's not far away. That's just how animals work. You can call it instinct. You can call it good sense. Call it what you want. But the animals whom we consider the least intelligent, they stay close to the very ones who give them life. They cry out to the ones who nurture and protect them. But people, well, that's another story. People are another story. Only human beings stray. Only the children of God exhibit this unnatural behavior of turning away from love and protection and the God who made them. In our text today, we find some of the saddest words that Luke pens. Jesus is thinking about Jerusalem. Jesus came to this world because he loved people. Jesus came to provide shelter from the storms of life. Jesus came to protect them from themselves, from sin, from their enemies. Time after time in the Old Testament, God reminds the children of Israel, I am the God who led you out of Egypt. I am the God who led you out of bondage. Do you remember what it's like, Israel, when you were back there working for Pharaoh? Do you remember what it was like to be a slave? I led you out of that. I am about to give you a land flowing with milk and honey. I want the best for you, Israel. Stay close to me. Stay close to me. Stay under my wings of protection. Stay under my wings of love. I will lead you. I will care for you. But we know the story. We know the story all too well. The very first time something happened or something did not go Israel's way, what did they do? They forsook the God who was trying his best to care for them. Moses is up on the mountain. Moses is talking to God. What are the children of Israel doing? They are making a God they can see, they can touch, they can worship. They are making a God in their own image. And it just gets worse from there. They get thirsty. And what do? They grumble and they complain. Yet God provides for them water from the rock. They get hungry. And they complain. And they murmur. And they say it would have been better if we had stayed in Egypt. And what did God do? God sends them food. Everything they needed. Everything they could want. everything that was needed for protection, for love, for satisfaction. God wanted to give them. They should have stayed close. They should have stayed close. They should have done exactly what those two baby hippos did. But you know they didn't. You know how Israel did. And God would try to send them a message. God would send them a prophet. What did they do? They killed the messenger. Over and over and over. Finally, God sent his son. And it's his son Jesus who, thinking about everything Jerusalem has went through, all of the needless pain they have bore, all of the trials they have been through that God did not intend for them to go through. And Jesus laments. He cries. I think with tears streaming down his face, he says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood right under her wings? But Jerusalem, you would not. I hear the words of Jesus, and we hear the words of God lamenting. And what we really hear in those words is we hear the sound of God's heart breaking. We hear the love of a mother. For God loves his children. And yet Jesus says the children have strayed. They have killed the prophets. They have stoned those who were sent to them. And as the mother hen spreads her wings over her brood, God wanted to do it for his people. But they said no. They said no. How could such a thing be? How could they do such a thing? How could the children of Israel been so foolish? Especially when God had delivered them over and over and over. It's a hard question. I guess the harder question is, though, how can we be so foolish? How can we behave so unnaturally as to stray from the sheltering love of God? When we turn the question back on us, it begins to hurt. Because can any of us say that we have never trembled through the troubled night, or felt the dread of death or of old age as it draws nearer to us or even a loved one? Is there anyone here who has not experienced the pain of a relationship gone sour and the added burden of knowing our own participation in the withering of that love? Is there anyone among us who have not had mornings when we were ashamed to look at ourselves in the mirror because we knew what we have done and we knew what we have said, and we have been ashamed of how we have hated, how we have envied, how we have lusted, how we have lied, and how far we have fallen from God's wings? Jesus says, how often I would have loved to have gathered you, Jerusalem, as a hen gathers her brood, but you would not let me. There's a story told about a disciple who was having trouble with his marriage. So he went to his master and he told his master that his marriage was falling apart. So his master said, well, this is my advice for you. I want you to go home and I want you to listen very closely to every word that your wife says. He did. He went home. He listened for the next few weeks very carefully to every word his wife said. It revolutionized the marriage. The marriage got much, much better. Would you listen today to what God has to say to you? Very carefully. Would you turn your eyes and your ears away from the noise of the world? And would you listen to the God who wants what is best for you? Later, that disciple went back to his master and he said, my marriage is so much better. The master said, I want you to do one more thing. I want you to go back and I want you to listen now to what your wife is no longer saying to you. When we start to listen for the words of love, pretty soon the words of hate, pretty soon the words of condemnation, pretty soon the words that we have dreaded, they begin to not be so loud. Listen, hear the voice of invitation. Come unto me, all of you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, Jesus said. Even now the mother hen would gather us in the shadow of the outstretched wings. Even now the mother hen wants to give us exactly what we need. In Canada, there was a hen house that had burned. It was a horrible fire. Not much they could do. By the time the fire trucks got there, well, just about everything had been lost. Well, the firemen, as they were going through the wreckage, came upon one hen lying near what had been the door of the hen house. Her top feathers were singed. Her neck was limp. They bent down to pick up the dead hen. Just as they did that, they saw something move. In fact, they saw something scurry out from beneath her burnt corpse. From beneath her came 4 little chickens. They survived because they were sheltered under the hen's wings. They survived because they were protected. They were even saved from death as she died to protect them. We live in a world that is frightening. A world that is dangerous. A world that if we were left to our own devices, we could not make it. And God doesn't expect us to. Jesus looks at Jerusalem. Jesus looks at what they're going through. And it must have broken his heart. It didn't have to be like that. It didn't have to be such. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. This morning, Jesus calls you and calls me. He calls us to the shelter of his protected wings. He calls you and me to the safety of his arms stretched out for us on a cross. He calls us to trust him. No matter what our fears, our hurts, or our troubles are, to trust him, to trust that his arms are strong enough and that his wings are wide enough to keep us safe from the storm. And it's in the shadow of those wings that we do find everything we ever needed. Jerusalem. Jerusalem. The city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I have desired to gather your children as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. We know how Jerusalem's story ended. You were not willing. How will your story end? Amen.